got no home, ain't got no shoes, ain't got no money, ain't got no class, ain't got no skirts, ain't got no sweaters, ain't got no perfume, ain't got no love, ain't got no faith. I ain't got no culture, ain't got no mother, ain't got no father, ain't got no brother, ain't got no children, ain't got no aunts, ain't got no uncles, ain't got no love, ain't got no mind. I ain't got no country, ain't got no schooling, ain't got no friends, ain't got no nothing, ain't got no water, ain't got no air, ain't got no smoke, ain't got no chicken, ain't got no water, ain't got no love, ain't got no faith, ain't got no love.
Hello.
Ain't got no wine, ain't got no
It's going to be my critique of Peter Joseph and Lee Camp's critique of Bernie Sanders. Inequality Town Hall. Full disclosure, did not watch the Inequality Town Hall. And I'm going to watch it eventually, but, you know, I always keep up with Peter Joseph, and then now I've been like, you know, I've been kind of suspicious because I realized, I feel silly talking to myself, but I'm on the phone. I love this song. I've been following Peter Joseph since back in the maybe 2005 as early as, like right when we first got computers, when we first started getting YouTube and first starting these, you know, I always got into documentaries, like eventually, kind of in a way, partially because of Zeitgeist probably was one of the supposed leftist nobody knew if Alex Jones was like, oh, he seems like he has an interest in anti-war, he has interest in leftist stuff. But Peter Joseph basically come out in the same sort of, he's been on Alex Jones, he's debated Stephen Molyneux. I don't know, I get the debate of Stephen Molyneux, it seems like, you know, platform a moron. I think I look like a fat Stephen Molyneux, but he's fat too, so fuck it. Okay. Can I see that? I want to get money. I want to get big, big money. So send me money, everybody. Who's not out there? So, way back in the day, you know, I used to sort of believe that maybe Building 7 was a controlled demolition, but recently I revisited like the evidence, and it becomes very clear that it's all part of a right-wing propaganda machine. Because you look at the architects and engineers of 9/11 Truth, and you could go to, like, I should have the site. I don't have that up there, but I researched that too, where there are people who were involved who said, yeah, it just seemed like a scheme to, like, spend money or something. Of course, and that's key too, because Zeitgeist organization and probably all the different branches around the world are like 501c3s. What does that mean? That's like a church where there was a recent decision where you're not supposed to be allowed to comment in politics. I don't know if Trump was able to. I forget whether Trump was actually. I know he wanted to repeal that, where like people, basically your TV preachers would be able to, comment in politics, which they aren't legally able to now because they're a 501c3. And I'm saying like Peter Joseph's a 501c3. He's a non-profit organization, and that's key too. To me, because it's like they use the non-profit sector to funnel, like, say, it's like one of the easiest ways. I think, I don't these are just all my cockamamie theories, but they're all based on the fact that, it's going to be about, there's a tremendous value in avoiding paying taxes. They have no problem making money through their financial profits, the 1% I'm talking about. So, like, it becomes a matter of, like, if you're in the billionaire class, of just trying to either hide the money, like, say you have someone like Trump, you're saying, I'm all over the place. So let's go back to, let's go to a part. Let's do a part, let's just go to a part of,
economy.
Peter Joseph.
Instead, the phenomenon pointed out.
Okay, he's just getting over the, I'm not going to play that, but business logic isn't, no duh, business logic isn't moral logic. And he's saying, oh, the repeated theme is that policy can't help. And it even goes, we'll play it definitely in the future here, probably in this video. There'll probably be definitely some follow-up videos to this until, I want these people to be exposed, because I think Lee Camp and Peter Joseph are really just obviously, in my mind, are obviously part of the whole right-wing propaganda, whether it's like, Russians might be involved, libertarians might be involved, rich oil people. That's the key theme, is there's like how much oil wealth is like buried in Siberia. That's the key. That's what we're talking about. Fracking Siberia and the Ukraine and whatnot. Tremendous amounts of money that are like, that's why these big games, because there's really, all these people are part of the system, and they're all, benefiting basically, whether the Clintons are, they're all like, and Bernie has 3 houses. Go get the fuck out. Okay. So I want to get to start getting more into the critique here. So I'll stop rambling for a sec.
Of economic.
Oh yeah, he keeps repeating it over and over. It can't be policy. Like Bernie's trying to get policy. I'll move this forward a little.
Regions really need efficacy.
Somebody's dignity should not be based in the profit of a firm. That's just the bottom line. That's just all.
And the crowd goes wild. Yet it's this kind of moral invocation that continues to stifle any type of technical progress in the act of this community. We have to stop thinking in terms of what is right morally, demanding people act against their own self-interest in the market game. Because that...
Wait a minute. Demanding that people act against, so we're going to let people act in their self-interests in the market game? We're not going to demand that in the market game, they're going to act differently? Is that what he said? That's what he said, right?
That's what the invocation implies.
And he's plus about this technologization, which they have all the power and the wealth and the money. And they have the access to the power and the wealth and the money. And they have the control of the power and the wealth and money through the system that they control through. And that's another huge claim he's making here, because this is kind of the prologue, so I'm going to keep laying out all his whacktastical claims here. Whacktastical, I just made up that word on the spot. All his whacktastical claims, one of them is like, that the people, he's like, the people who think you could get money out of politics, what a bunch of dolts and nincompoops, just really ridicules that idea. And it doesn't hold up. So I'm going to try to.
It's exhausting listening to the platitudes and righteousness of what should.
This was similar to something I saw on Vice the other day, which I think they might be basically, because they're not like for, you could tell if they're for the progressive agenda. It's a very simple agenda. The people who are for it, I see like Sam Sater, Tom Hartman, the Young Turks, Kyle Kulinski, are all like very consistent all the time, and plenty of other people who are basically consistent with these basic, Jeremy Corbyn is basically somewhat consistent with these, goes a little further into nationalization. But the fact that Bernie Sanders calls himself a democratic socialist actually sort of indicates that he does think that nationalization And I basically think I'm calling public optionalism. That's what I think that's obviously the answer is we need to it's like the octopus of the system. We got to peel off the arms of the octopus bit by bit. And if the system could come back and do good in the system, like that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying kill the market. I'm just saying, is the market providing value to us? So why are we supporting the market? Why is our whole system obviously supporting the market? So he's saying we shouldn't be behind backing. I mean, really, that's like as simple. I don't need to go like that deep into it. If you watch I'm going to go a little bit more deeper into it just to make my point. But it's just he clearly is not saying he's, So I'm just saying and if you look at Lee Camp's involvement with it, the RT network, which has a lot of there's the Lionel Nation guy, and then there's that one snarky, very attractive 30-ish-year-old woman who's on the right and on the left, but she's always more criticizing the mainstream media, which seems like it could be a left thing. They are doing all the libertarian stuff, which seems to deliberately appeal to left-wingers. Let's see another clip.
In this public debate on effectively human rights, when we are entrenched in a system that is really morally bankrupt by default and isn't designed to favor equality or justice. It's designed to favor hierarchy and injustice. Everybody's dignity, so to speak, is contingent upon income and profit in this type of system.
True.
One's dignity is proportional to their purchasing power, in other words, for only their purchasing power gives them, in effect, any human rights
to a
degree.
For being here. And
housing.
when we talk about the decline of the middle class, clearly we're talking about the loss of 50,000 factories in this country since 2001, of jobs being sent abroad to China, etc., of workers now working for much lower wages than they used to, and the decline of the trade union movement. I want to say a few words about those issues.
And this begins the extensive conversation about unions, which seems to be at the core of the solutions proposed by this panel.
Now he's going to come
unions are important to keep some balance and market class warfare, as I touched upon before. Remember, we live in a different condition today. The unions had strong force decades ago and political power, but the natural gravitations of capitalism have eroded that. And rather than look at this as an ebb and flow, let's look at this as an evolution. Sanders mentioned the sending of jobs overseas, declining wages, marginalization, battles against unions, etc. The implication is that these things are supposed to not happen, when, of course, the truth is that the entire gravitation of our economy ensures this constant diminishment, attenuation, and antagonism from the ownership class.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, it's just so ridiculous. He's talking about no policy adjustments. I mean,
which really holds power, as naturally would be the case in.
And of course, the obvious is what about the recent West Virginia and Oklahoma? And they're probably going to be New Mexico next. They're going to be coming. It's obviously the whole thing is taking off, and that's why he's coming out against the actual progressive agenda. This is him saying that policy can't change it, democracy can't change it. It actually says right on, if you go on the Venus Project, which is Jacques Fresco's site, it was just basically at the end was a total rambling old geezer, basically. Some interesting ideas, but he's saying democracy is all. I mean, that's basically what we're saying in terms of okay. I mean, we could look out for the certain quotes that really prove what I want to say. Is that I just want to make clear that's what I'm asserting, is that he's saying, no unions, the entire, and obviously the whole capitalist system is clearly. But he's suggesting somehow changing it by other than democratic means. Now, what could that mean? See, that's what I'm saying. What could that possibly mean? Is is there any real left position that doesn't have democracy as part of its? No. I'll just do it. Short answer, no.
This type of government with the foundation being markets once again.
He's talking about
You know, they seem redundant for me to say all.
What does he mean that the basic? You know, he's going to come out with. I can't wait to read his new. And of course, he has a new movie coming out that's like been very many years in the making. So we're all going to see this like. But he's like I say, he's been in a Michael Tracy. He's been on the Tom Hartman show. He's taken very seriously. He's been on the Abby Martin show, and I've been watching him for years. And a lot of what he says is just very true, like the same kind of crap that everybody else on the left is saying. But then here, he's switching it and saying shit like this.
But if this town hall was supposed to be progressive and in depth, we can't keep falling back on these old notions of economic warfare and the idea that the lower classes will simply organize more strongly, develop strong unions, influence political party, and somehow maintain social justice equilibrium. While it is certainly possible, with very heavy, improbable, but counter-system legislation to stop international capital flows, the outsourcing of labor, and so on, along with perhaps the application of universal basic income to give the working class less vulnerability, enhancing their ability to fight back against being manipulated into lower wages or poor circumstances. That's simply not the way it's going to go if government is composed of business power. I'm not saying anything is impossible once again. I'm saying that it's improbable. And I know the conversation is difficult regarding trying to make structural changes to our economic system. It's extremely difficult, requires a deep mass movement and sharp focus about what the changes need to be. But the fact that we're leaving this out of the conversation here is the actual problem.
But even 15 isn't a living wage. It's not the wage that we grew up with. And so we have to have 15 in a union. Workers have to have a seat at the table because if it's left up to employers, they're always going to make a decision on their bottom line.
Is he really going to come out against like raising the minimum wage now? So he's against healthcare, unions, raising the minimum wage, and democracy. So is he a leftist? Or is he what I think is a right-wing agorist? And is Lee Camp also part of the right-wing propaganda structure?
It's about their bottom line. They're always going to send it to their shareholders and corporations. So I agree with what you said. We can't leave it up to the private sector. Workers have to get a seat at the table. And how do we build that trade union movement again when employers are spending $1 billion a year?
How about a real man like actually Kyle Kalinske was talking about a big old strike? You know, there is a lot of like he literally says that like collective action is pointless, you know. And like you say, we see the West Virginia, Oklahoma, the morning. All right.
Fighting and union busting, fighting workers as they try to organize.
Not to run this into the ground, but I keep trying to find a fitting analogy that embraces the kind of naivety we hear along the lines of what Estrada is saying. She points out the actual problem, but doesn't give the gravity of that problem the weight it deserves. For lack of a better analogy, it's like capturing a lion in the wild from Africa, plopping it in your living room as a pet, and then being surprised when it attacks you. It's also important to point out that unions are really no different in their incentive.
The whole point is he's not mentioning the history of what unions happened when 40 years ago, when the basic, when Ronald Reagan broke up the unions. He's not talking about, somehow he's just leaving, he's talking about this bullshit analogy. He's not talking about the actual history where it was part of basically the John Birch Society, the Libertarians, the Kochs, the Rockefellers, the Democratic Leadership Council, who got under, and Clinton became part of the neoliberal, and Obama was part of the neoliberal movement. And they all had this philosophy of basically let business rule. It's kind of like, you know, a form of fascism with like a lot of, you know, a good amount of, but they could still have homeless and, you know, all kinds of like uncovered. It's the only country that has uncovered people. And we'll see like later on too. That's why I want to like almost just advance to the one part. It's like the, I think this one part just makes my whole case, and I really don't have to do maybe I'll do another video, but I would just as soon do my next video on something else because I'm getting bored with this bullshit because it's the same thing over and over. And this is what I want to do, but I'm not going to like do like, I'm not good at making like a very step-by-step. I mean, I've never done the video editing yet, but I don't know if I necessarily want to do like that kind of a takedown because anyways, I'm going to try to get to this. But here you basically watch the union part. I could go on and on with this shit, man.
And business owners.
Let me see.
If a union had the option and power to increase its wages 100-fold, you can bet that they probably would, in the exact same self-interest, self-preservation that business owners have to pay as little as possible to their employees. So unions and management, unions and company are really two sides of the same coin of economic warfare. And the goal should be to remove the need for war to begin with. So yes, the working class needs a seat at the table, obviously, in the context that we are in. But I'm tired of people, once again, speaking of unions as though they are a solution when they're really just a reaction.
Because 60% of workers want a union. So you ask, why don't they get one? They don't get one because they're being fired. They're being told that their jobs will go to Mexico, where they're competing with $3.95.
What did you expect? Strata, again, makes it seem like these behaviors are anomalous. And the
Okay. This is very interesting too, because the reason I had such a problem finding it was it's at 51:54 when they finally put this. Yeah. You see what they put on the screen here.
Beverly Hills, other end. Nominal, national class, and why they don't neighborhood somewhere. If you don't go on one end, it's on its the extremes on either upper class national nightmare.
Look at this. 52:12 at the very end. He's going to talk about like how the U.S. can't have. Here.
Because within this context,
This guy is a freaking joke, is what I'm saying here. Listen to this. Listen to this BS. Don't take this guy seriously.
then you have Beverly Hills style neighborhoods on the other, then you have the middle class neighborhoods in the middle. This gives a false impression, if you saw nothing else, that this pocket of middle class happiness exists on its own. Well, capitalism
It
works,
just
the middle class
rambles
is
and
there,
digresses
but
into
it's a
fucking
pocket,
bullshit.
and it only exists because of the extremes on either side. So without going into any more detail as to why the United States has become so bizarre and this upper class national nightmare, it is within this context we have to understand that the system of political and economic power we have in the United States today, how it's evolved, where we are, will simply not allow easily basic human interests,
The U.S.
public health advancements such as, say, universal health care. It's representative of a different stage, will simply not allow easily basic human interest and public health advancements such as, say, universal health care. It's representative of a different stage of the capitalist sickness, and that much harder to change.
It's hard to change, but like, so that should not be the.
Anyway, much could be said on that, but I'm tired now, so that's enough for me.
And then he
I hope
quits.
this has been helpful.
And that's the end of the critique.
Share this video with us.
That's why we could do it, but it's going to be really hard. So, like, I don't know. Unions, we shouldn't do. All those policies, we shouldn't do. We're at a different stage of capitalism. It's just like, he's suggesting something else. He's suggesting something other. He's saying, like, the reforms, obviously. I mean, I don't know how to make it any clearer. So, maybe I'm going to take a break now.